Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to Nature Connects. Nature Connects is TNC in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with experts, scientists, influencers, and our partners from New England and around the world. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm Deb Markowitz, the State Director of the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts, and today I'm going to be your host. Here at the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts, we're dedicated to creating a healthier world for all. We work locally and then globally using innovative science and scalable, long-lasting solutions to tackle the most complex environmental challenges facing our warming planet. We know that what we do here in Massachusetts to protect nature will mean a better future for people around the world. We have an exciting program for you today. We're going to be chatting with Mike Whittemore. He's the land steward for the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts. Mike's going to give us an update on his work restoring rare sandplain grasslands on Martha's Vineyard. And he's going to give us a firsthand look at the positive impacts of a recent prescribed burn at MassWildlife's Katama Plains and the nearby Katama Airfield. He's also going to share some of his most recent research into the best techniques for restoration and give us some insights into how to work best with conservation partners and how we're working with conservation partners on the island. Before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a little bit about Mike. Mike works for the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts, focused on Cape Cod and the islands, including Martha's Vineyard, where he lives. He's a native of Framingham, Massachusetts, and he's been with the Nature Conservancy and living on the vineyard since the early summer of 2018. In his current role, he implements conservation stewardship for the Nature Conservancy's preserves and conservation restrictions located on Martha's Vineyard and on Cape Cod. He leads habitat restoration work and oversees the Hoft Farm seasonal residents, managing volunteers, contractors, and seasonal staff. And he's also part of the Sandplain Grassland Network. Mike got his MS in Environmental Studies from Ohio University, where he focused his research on mapping plant communities at a private nature preserve. So as you hear Mike, you may have questions. Please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I just want to thank everyone again for joining us, and let's dive in. I'm passing it to you, Mike.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. And thank you, Deb, for that nice introduction. Today, we're going to be talking mostly about a favorite slice of my job, which is ecological restoration of our lands. Oops, excuse me. Of our lands on Martha's Vineyard. But before we jump in, I want to give a quick update of where we're at with the Islands program as a whole. So recently we've hit some milestones worth sharing. Over the past few years, the program has improved on many fronts to where we're simply able to do more conservation now. For example, this year we finished upgrading our fleet to include new equipment such as recently purchased truck, a new tractor with a larger mower deck, all new fire gear, a state-of-the-art seed harvester I'll talk about momentarily, and all new power tools. This year, we also applied major upgrades to our facilities, which I'll also talk about a little later. And our program administration was recently overhauled to improve efficiency and organization. And we recently increased our capacity on island, which is really exciting, to include a stewardship field assistant who will begin in July. As we've made those operational improvements, we've also been able to get a lot of good habitat management done on the ground, also known as the fun stuff, which is what I'll be talking about mostly today. All this to say that the Islands program is strongly positioned to carry out our mission for years to come. Now let's get to the fun stuff. For those of you who don't know, the Nature Conservancy has been on island for the past 35 years. And if you want to know what 35 years looks like, just look at your webinar presenter who just turned 35 years old this year. In that time, we have built a portfolio of lands here comprising of 1,000 acres of land we own and 560 acres of easement land centered on protecting, managing, and expanding globally imperiled coastal grassland and heathland habitats. These early successional habitats are fire adapted and range from grasslands, heathlands, shrublands, and open savannas. They're really like the prairies of the northeastern coast. TNC is primarily focused on protecting the rare biodiversity here, That's why we're here on island for the most part. As many of you know, biodiversity loss is one of the existential threats that we face today. And this corner of the state happens to harbor some of the highest concentrations of rare and uncommon plants and animals in the region. Not only are these habitats rare because of their ecological requirements of needing sandy soils, salt spray, onshore winds, and periodic fire to flourish, they also face extreme pressures from people, namely habitat loss. Apparently, people like to build their houses on flat land close to the ocean where these habitats exist. Today, these habitats are reduced to small, isolated patches on the landscape. That's really the result, and that's why we're here to protect them. Our lands and our work here has regional importance. This year, I put together this map of all known coastal grassland and heathland throughout the range. This map is part of a paper I plan to publish in a scientific journal soon. Notice how small and isolated each site is. The sites are spread out so sparsely. As part of this research, we also collected plant species lists from every site we possibly could from over the past 40 years. What we found is that although these habitats exist along a fairly large range from Long Island all the way up to Maine, Martha's Vineyard is one of the last strongholds. The sites here are just higher quality. That is in large part due to strong conservation efforts from TNC and other organizations over the years. In comparison, Long Island, for example, used to have a giant grassland some of you might know called Hempstead Plains. I'm talking tens of thousands of acres of native grasses, wildflowers, grassland animals. Guess how much exists now? Only 13 acres. What we do to protect these lands on Martha's Vineyard right now will directly impact these imperiled habitats for prosperity across the region. Without the work we do here, our islands could look a lot more like Long Island. So focusing back on this map, every site that you see needs constant management to remain open. That's a large part of my job, is just to constantly keep them open. But it's important to know that each site is in varying degree of quality due to land use history. Some high quality sites are already bursting with grassland flora and fauna, don't need much work, while other sites are being converted from agriculture back to native grassland and need intensive restoration. So keep this in mind as we go through the presentation. Securing the land and conservation is less than half the battle. These early successional habitats need perpetual management to flourish, which includes mowing, intensive plant control, invasive plant control rather, and controlled burns. And like any management, it takes years of research and trial and error to form best management practices. That's why in 2016, TNC helped found the Sandplain Grassland Network. This network meets monthly and consists of scientists and land managers from several organizations throughout the region. In 2018, in fact, we published a website and guidebook on how to manage these habitats. This year, we plan to publish our findings in a scientific journal. So the article will be titled Challenges, Successes, and Recommendations of Management of Northeastern U.S. Coastal Sandplain Grasslands as Regional Biodiversity Hotspots. We're super excited to publish this. So now that you know why we're here on islands, how rare these habitats are, and what we're doing to refine the best management practices, let's get into some of the work that we're doing on the ground. What you're looking at here is one of our restoration sites called Bamford Preserve, which is on the south shore adjacent to Katama Airfield. Before we purchased Bamford Preserve for $64 million in 2001, this field was used for agriculture. It was filled with non-native cool season agricultural grasses and low plant and animal diversity. Had we not stepped in to buy it, it would have become a subdivision of houses. So on a scale of quality, obviously, this site ranked very low, but it had very good potential for being so close to the ocean with the right soils for sandplain grassland. As I mentioned before, our lands are in varying stages of restoration. So in restoration, we're generally trying to influence two main variables: habitat structure, like trees versus grasslands, and species composition. Although we did some tree removal here along the edges, the focus of this particular site has primarily been to replace non-native vegetation with native plant species. In 2007, we partnered with the Marine Biological Laboratory to study best management practices to restore this site. We learned that tilling several times, then planting native plants worked very well to replace these non-native cool season agricultural grasses. Little by little, we harvested seed of little blue stem, a native grass, and planted it on site. This picture was taken a year ago when we finished planting the last plot on the land. Carlos Montoya, an expert we work with, is in the act of planting native seed harvested on island in this cedar, and has planted it recently tilled land that I tilled. Now that the inertia of the site has finally transitioned from agriculture to a field of little blue stem, we are in the phase of adding native biodiversity. But how do we add this diversity? One of the best tools at our disposal for large-scale grassland restoration is our seed stripper. This machine is how we collect so much grass seed to plant at Bamford Preserve. This year, we purchased this brand new custom seed stripper, hand-built by Ned Groles in Nebraska. I first learned about his work of art from a blog post that a fellow TNC employee in Nebraska posted. So for years, we've been using this harvester that is different than this, and it only harvests grass seed. But as we're transitioning to adding wildflower diversity, we had this one built, which has an interchangeable spindle to harvest wildflower seeds. So the limiting factor to large-scale restoration is seed. To do it right, we want seed from the islands to keep with local genetics. And the only way to do that at scale is to harvest it ourselves. So going forward, this piece of machinery right here will be the future of our restoration work at Bamford Preserve and our other properties. So over the past 4 years, we've been focusing heavily on bringing the structure of all of our lands where we want it. We are almost there. The next step is to add this plant diversity. Plant diversity leads to animal diversity. If you build it, they will come. Another way we add diversity is by planting plugs that were grown in a greenhouse. Around this time last year, we planted 1,000 butterfly weed seedlings at our Bamford Preserve at the same site we've been talking about with the help of volunteers. The plants were grown locally by Polyhill Arboretum as part of their wild type program. And the wildflower is native to sandplain grasslands and will increase the diversity of plant species at the site. So looking forward at this site, we will continue planting these plugs and seeding in wildflower diversity harvested from other sites on islands. That's the most important thing. This year, Polyhill actually grew us another 1,000 New England blazing star plants, these plugs, which are actually rare plants. And we plan to actually plant those in the next couple of weeks. This species is rare and endemic to the northeastern coastal region. And we believe a good spring burn in the near future at this site will eliminate most of the agricultural grasses while pulling together the native grassland species. This site is a perfect example of what TNC does on islands. We secured the land in conservation. We partnered with scientists to research best management practices, then restored the land. So today, this site offers a living case study in how to restore agriculture back to imperiled habitat that other conservation organizations can use. In contrast to Bamford Preserve, this particular site is in much more advanced stage of restoration, as you can see. This land exists on private land that was slated to be a golf course, in fact. Thanks to some terrific landowners, the land was purchased and immediately protected in conservation, where we hold the conservation restriction. Since then, we have been restoring the land as a mosaic of barrens habitats, little by little. Every site that we restore has different management goals based on its character. This area happens to be too small to manage for large territorial bird species that are declining. So our goal is to manage it as a mosaic of barrens habitats to boost biodiversity. So think of it as a mini biological hotspot. In the early 2000s, this site was mostly forested, believe it or not. Over the years, we have been fine-tuning the structure to expand the grassland, introduce more biodiversity, and to thin surrounding forests to promote oak savanna habitats. This year, for the first time in 20 years, we reached a very important milestone. The habitat structure is now where we want it. So we don't plan to cut any more trees around the perimeter of the grassland. The species composition has also been biologically diverse and includes rare plants. The photo on the top left shows the recent removal and stump grinding of over 250 trees we took out to open up the savanna. The understory has since filled in with native grasses and wildflowers. And for the most part, the trees that we took out were pitch pines from an even age stand left over from agriculture. It was a low quality stand. And we released oak species so that they can become more dominant. The photo on the top right shows invasive plant control that we have to do every year. We applied a targeted mow this year to maintain grassland structure like we do every year. And the bottom right photo just shows the diversity of the grassland in the fall after the mow. So what's next at this property? Now that the structure is where we want it, and after years of controlled burns, we are transitioning from a restoration phase to a maintenance regime. That's going from restoration to maintenance. In a maintenance regime, our focus will be to continue controlling invasive plants like you see on the top right. We'll be applying our targeted mow like we do every year to keep the land open. And we'll continue to include or introduce native seed from on island. We'll also continue burning this site. Specifically though, we really hope to use this site as a place to introduce more rare plant species in the future. Another restoration site we manage is our Francis Newell Woods Preserve in Chilmark. The site is over 500 acres and probably the largest unbroken tract of land on the island. In one area on this piece of land where the soils are just right, there's a sandplain grassland savanna there. This site is low in quality and in a less advanced stage as the previous site. But over the years, we have been influencing the structure by removing trees to create an open savanna. In 2016, we logged a section of forest to open up grassland and piled the wood in several areas along the edge. This year, we worked with a contractor to mow the 30-acre grassland and removed the logs. This effort will not only improve the grassland habitat structure here, but also reduce fire risk, which is really important on the island. The bottom right picture shows the finished product of the work we've done this year to the habitat structure. In the coming years, we hope to use our new seed harvester to collect diversity of grass and wildflower seeds on island and plant them here to boost diversity. We have burned here in the past, but the ecological effects will only improve as we put down more native seed from other grasslands. By the way, speaking of controlled burning, let's take a look at another restoration site where we burned this fall. Katama Airfield, one of the best examples of native sandplain grassland on Earth. And this is a site we've been managing since the 80s. It's filled with rare plants and animals. We have been applying prescribed burns here consistently since the 80s, which is important because sandplain species are adapted to fire and need it to thrive in many cases. In November, TNC in Massachusetts partnered with MassWildlife and the town of Edgartown to conduct prescribed burns on approximately 70 acres here. Fire is one of the best tools for managing the sandplain grassland system, preserving precious fire-adapted native species that depend on these habitats while reducing woody vegetation cover that threatens grassland species. Volunteers from several agencies helped out, including DCR, the town of Edgartown, Edgartown Fire Department, Chilmark, Mass Army, National Guard, and many others. Here's Nicole from the National Guard on ignition. Fire not only disfavors plants that shouldn't be here, like non-native and invasive species, it also favors the good stuff, including rare plants. Fire also puts down nutrients and clears the top layer of leaves to expose bare mineral soil that native plants love. Now, pay attention to this picture. Keep that picture in your mind while we flip to the next slide. Here's a picture I took just yesterday of the same spot. Notice that the woody species aren't leafing out, like the trees and the large shrubs. This is actually a good thing. Woody species were fire killed here. It was a hot burn, and they are the biggest threat to this site because they shade out delicate grassland, grasses, and wildflowers. So those puffy round plants you see are a species called wild indigo. Soon they will have these really bright yellow flowers and offer nectar to pollinators. And the rest of the vegetation that's popping up is almost entirely blueberry, which is a good source for rare moths. One more project I want to talk about is one that I'm very excited about. I just found out we got funding for this project. It's over $100,000 to do this work. We'll be restoring the structure of the medicine lots next year to create an open post oak, white oak savanna. This is work that we've always wanted to do. We just didn't have the right funding for it. The medicine lots are 100 acres of high quality habitat that sit between the biologically diverse state forest. Those of you who are on our Martha's Vineyard, the state forest is 5,000 acres in the middle of the island. It's really, really lush with biodiversity. So this site is right between that and the Long Point Wildlife Refuge to the south, on the south shore. We purchased it in 2013 and haven't been able to do the restoration yet. But this site is a frost bottom, which, if you don't know, is a unique feature left over from the glacier, actually. Think of a dried out river valley depression. They can sometimes hold frost even into the summer here on Martha's Vineyard due to their low topography, which really can keep woody plants from taking hold. If you look at this picture, notice the tall oaks and pines in the background. Those exist just outside the frost bottom where the growing conditions are naturally more favorable to them. Unfortunately, trees do sometimes take hold in the frost bottom, especially when fire is not used to control, hence the need for this project. We need to go out there and clear some of the shrubs and trees. The work will benefit 25 state-listed rare species that have been documented there. That's incredible for 100 acres. 25 state-listed rare species from threatened to endangered exist in this little pocket of frost bottom. And that includes the eastern whippoorwill that's been declining. It's a bird that's been declining throughout the range. This project will consist of tree removal and shrub removal, wood chip removal, heavy mowing, and stump grinding. We just can't wait to see what interesting sandplain plants pop up from the soil once the carpet of trees and shrubs are reduced. All right, so now you've seen some of the projects we've actually been working on, but now how do we know that our management is actually working? What informs our work on the ground? Well, the Nature Conservancy is an organization guided by science, as you saw from the 2 papers we are hoping to publish soon. We love to take data. On some of our more delicate sites that hold rare species, we actually go out and monitor these populations by doing censuses. We survey every single plant that we find in these populations every year. For example, 2 plant species that we're actively monitoring closely are sandplain agellinus, which is a federally endangered plant. It's really endemic to this region only, and New England blazing star, state threatened. After all, rare species are proxies for these imperiled systems, so we're really happy to report that over the past couple of years and after recent burns, our New England blazing star population seems to have really increased a lot. Even though we do a lot of ecological restoration here on the island, we also do much more to contribute to conservation. For example, did you know we actually own a big field house on the island? It's called Hoff Farm Field Station. Hoff Farm Field Station is used to offer subsidized housing to conservation scientists, interns, volunteers, and staff to enable conservation on island. On Martha's Vineyard, there is a housing crisis. Many of you might know, actually. If you're lucky enough, especially think about being an intern coming in and finding a job here. If you're lucky enough to find housing in the summer months, it's very expensive. We put folks up here from organizations such as Woodwell Climate Research Center, Polyhill Arboretum, MV Oyster Group, Biodiversity Works, the Trustees of Reservations, the Wampanoag Tribe, many more. We've been doing this for the past 20 years as a subsidized rate, and we're really doing this to enable conservation. So over the past year, we've got some exciting news. We worked with contractors to make large upgrades on the exterior and the interior. This picture shows the difference from last year to this year on the outside. Here are pictures of the interior. On the top left, you can kind of see the before picture as things were getting boarded up a little bit. This house, it's an old farmhouse that was built in 1890 and updated in 2000 by TNC. This year, we updated the furniture, including couches, dressers, beds, and lamps. We also upgraded some appliances, such as a new stove and a grill. And we had the entire interior painted, included the wood floors. That was no easy feat during COVID, finding contractors on island, but we got it done. Thank you to all the volunteers. Some of you I know are on this call, actually, who helped put together furniture. This house should really be in great shape for many years to come. But going forward here, we plan to build a small barn next year to house our growing fleet of equipment and fix up 3 cabins on the property to house more people. All right, one more slide and then I'll stop talking. If not for TNC, these already imperiled habitats would be worse off. This is a photo from our Tuckernuck Island Preserve off the coast of Nantucket. Here, erosion takes 30 feet of land per year, where rare plants literally fall into the ocean daily. I mean, if you're looking at this photo and you squint your eyes enough, you can see a yellow thistle. It's a species, I believe it's a threatened species in Massachusetts. So it's getting ready to fall into the ocean as of last year. So for over the past 30 years, TNC has directly contributed to protecting, researching, and restoring these habitats here on islands, and then sharing our insights with partners and the public. But there is still much more to do. You might be asking yourself after watching this presentation, you know, with the program in such good shape right now and our lands finally transitioning from restoration phase to maintenance regime, what's next? Well, like I said, we will always need to manage these lands to keep them open and treeless, free of invasive species, and flourishing with good management like control burns. That's a big job in and of itself. However, there will soon be a time when we start to think bigger. How can we use our expertise and resources to help these habitats throughout the region and into the future? As you know, we've already started by working on regional research like the mapping project and publishing our findings from the Sandplain Grassland Network. But from an applied standpoint, saving the system really requires two practical main things. Protecting more restorable land inland for grasslands like this to migrate to in the future, and developing a way for local seed from these delicate systems to be mass produced and sold for restoration. Of course, like anything, TNC can't do this alone, which is why we value our partners so much. But we are certainly thinking about these issues as we look into the future in the face of climate change and massive biodiversity loss. Thank you.
Well, Mike, that was really interesting. I always love listening to you and hearing about our work at Martha's Vineyard. One of the things that I love about the work of TNC, but also your work, is that it's very place-based, right? You're thinking about sandplain grasslands in a particular location, but you're also thinking big, like erosion, what's happening, every year losing things into the ocean, and how this is a microcosm of something that's happening all over, all through the islands and really across the world. And so I guess just start by saying kudos to you. For folks who are watching, Mike is one of our rising stars in TNC, and we're just so happy to have you with us. One of the things that I love to envision, I haven't seen this in person yet because of the pandemic, is I can picture you in the summer with Hoff Farm filled with volunteers, maybe young people who are thinking about a career themselves at TNC someday or doing stewardship. And I'm just kind of curious about like Hoff Farm, like what is it like when it's filled with people? It's been 2 years of quiet, right, where we couldn't co-house volunteers. And this year we've opened at a lighter rate, not quite the density we ordinarily have, but we've got scientists and interns this summer. Is that right? Are they there already? What does it feel like to have the farm full again?
Well, there's pros and cons. What's really cool about a farm and living with folks who are typically younger than me is that there's we try and put people up from all different as many different conservation organizations as possible. Right now we have 4, but we're gonna end up having 9 people all together by the end of it this year. And they're such great people. They're so well vetted. This is such a competitive field, and who ends up living in Hoff Farm typically are just wonderful people. So there's that aspect of it. I really enjoy the company, really. And Hoff Farm, just to paint a little bit of a picture for you, it's an 1890s farmhouse refurbished, as I mentioned, but it's on 90 acres of land with all kinds of trails. In fact, it's some of the best trail system on the island. And so
Nice.
it's not only a hub for the people living in the house, to network and build their careers. And I will say this too, anecdote, many people on the island who are in higher positions in conservation, like Emily over at Edgartown Great Pond Foundation, I know Chris Bruno, for example, who was with DCR, they all started out, they all lived here. Emily Livingston over at Holly Hill, she's assistant director. So they had, so it's a really good sort of starting point for people.
What a good legacy for the island.
Yeah, it goes to show you that we're really enabling conservation here.
That's great.
It's just a wonderful place to live, yeah.
And so are you looking around because you're sitting in Hoff Farm right now?
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm looking out at the trails.
Yeah, that is really good. So I was so excited that we were able to make it possible for you to upgrade some of the equipment there. And, you do rely on a lot of heavy equipment that are investments. And is it making your life easier? How does that, how's it feeling to have, I know your cedar, we saw that was very cool piece of equipment. What else do you have there? And
yeah, that's a good question. This is, in order to do this line of work, you need state-of-the-art equipment, very specialized equipment. You need big enough equipment. It's typically just been me on the island with like an STA intern. And as I mentioned, we're actually increasing capacity for the first time this year. So starting in July, I'll have somebody a little higher level below me. But you've got to have the right equipment, but you also have to have equipment that's in good shape, because I'm also maintaining the equipment, and that takes a lot of time and energy. So it's just been great. The chapter's really believed in the cause here and helped us, and the donors have helped us fund the right equipment over the past few years, which is a huge help to get the work done on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. I was curious, I forgot that we have some, equipment that is designed to help out with the burn. And we, not surprisingly, got a whole lot of questions about the burn because it's kind of exciting. And in the past, it was super controversial, less so now because we know a lot more about the role of fire and just the way ecosystems evolved over time. And first of all, it sounds like, and it looks like this latest prescribed burn was really quite successful. Do we have more planned for the future? From your perspective, we've seen the benefits. What are the challenges that you see?
It's becoming increasingly challenging. The two strongholds for this whole system in the world, right? It only exists from Long Island to Maine, and Long Island's pretty decimated. And we don't want to turn into Long Island in that aspect. But the biggest challenge is just, we only have a small burn window, number one, and we don't have, there's a lot of political challenges to getting fire on the ground in such a tourist destination, when you need fire to have the best ecological effects, which is typically summer or late fall.
Well, so that's interesting. I'm just going to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
So you can't just burn any time.
No.
You have to know the right moment. And is that changing with climate change? Or are you just moment to moment saying, okay, we know it's early spring before things start sprouting, using a technical term. And, right?
They call it prescribed burn for a reason. We're diagnosing a situation, a management problem, and we're prescribing management to it. And so, for example, I'll give you a quick anecdote. When we're actively restoring agriculture, there's all these non-native cool season grasses and invasive species. We hit it with a spring burn because that's when those species are out and that's when they're most affected. When we transition to a restoration phase, when predominantly it exists with all native plants that love that fire, we hit it in the fall when they're going.
Oh, interesting.
So very, very, and so there's a lot of challenges there. And I'll just give you one more answer to this. Nantucket doesn't even burn anymore. The two strongholds in the whole world are Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. And so Martha's Vineyard, in fact, the Nature Conservancy is really one of the only organizations burning at scale. And we've been doing it since the 80s, but it's becoming more and more challenging.
And in that Nantucket, they're not doing it also because of all of the people's homes and they're worried about it. Is that right?
I think so. Yes, I think that's the challenge. And I'll just say that sandplain grasslands, fire's been around. it's debated by scientists and stuff, but you can really tell just by looking at the vegetation that's in these rare communities, they're all fire dependent. That's and so they really depend on this for many reasons.
So interesting. I was really compelled when we were first talking about the burn that, we just had that some of the invasives die from it and you've got seed that is waiting for the fire to really help it germinate. And I thought that was so interesting. And it is like, we think about those terrible wildfires out west, which are just heartbreaking. And And I know there's a lot of literature right now about how the size of those wildfires are because we weren't allowing burning, prescribed burns. And so there was a buildup of the undergrowth and the things that would take a fire and make it much more dangerous.
That's exactly right. And that's part of this. It's on the island, a very hot topic, pardon the pun, is fire fuel mitigation. And there's a big team working on this. And I just got to give credit to my supervisor, Karen Lombard, who not only is very involved in that higher level meeting with partners. They're trying to solve these really high level problems that go all the way up to the policy and state level. But Karen also does all the burn plans and does the hard work. And I go out there and burn and do the fun work. So behind the scenes, I got to give a big shout out to my awesome boss.
I like that. Yeah, good job, Karen. She is really great. We're lucky to have her. So fire fuel management, that's I had never heard those terms together. I think that's the right way to think about it. Like there's fuel in our forests, there's fuel, in these fields, and how do you manage it so that when there is a fire, it doesn't go out of control? And I think for the neighbors, like it's legitimate. You see those, it feels apocalyptic to see the smoke and it turns the sky gray and then the sun burns red through it. And it is very dramatic. And so I think we need a lot of education around it, right?
Yeah, and just a quick point about that. There's always trade-offs in habitat management and environmental science and studies and all this. Like people, we're taking out some trees in some areas and people ask, why would you take out trees? Carbon sequestration, trees are great. But in these habitats, they're so small and isolated at this point because of humans and habitat loss that we need to stretch out that amount of land as much as possible. And it's the last chance really these habitats have. So the same goes for fire. We're not going around burning everything, but these really important habitats that depend on fire, I think that's an important trade-off.
Vincent DeFarno asks, do you have information on Native American burn strategies on Martha's Vineyard before the invasion by non-Native people?
That's a really good question. And it's debated. I know, for example, David Foster's done some work on this. And, my interpretation of that is, I won't get into my interpretation of it, but we really don't know for sure. It's really tough. And the best source of data that we have to look at this is bog core samples, paleoecology, they call it. And so they're taking these cores of these old bogs and they're looking at pollen grains and dating them. And they're looking for charcoal deposits, but it's really coarse-grained research. It's not very reliable. Some ponds weren't able to be tapped into that are very important areas where it was probably burned. I always go back to the one thing, no matter what Native Americans' burn structure was, burning is so important, the work we do, because the plants that we're managing for respond best to it. It's the best management plan we have, period. Doesn't matter what happened in the past.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like, and another thing is, if I look at sort of the species that are in these really delicate systems as proof of what the management was in the past. So even though we might not be able to connect the dots, all these rare plants like fire. So I think that's a sign that there was probably a good amount of fire on the landscape.
Yeah, that makes sense from, when you think about evolutionary biology, that would definitely make sense. So there's a correlation, but not necessarily proven causation. Yeah, I like that. So, you had mentioned thinking at scale, when you're like thinking about burns and thinking about management and you also talked about seed production and, you had mentioned that seed production is important to restore habitats at scale. Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean seed production? Like there's a seed farm that we go to, or we collect them ourselves? I remember first when I was like 7 or 8 discovering that you could actually collect the marigold seeds and plant them again the next year. It's like, do we go collect seeds to plant the next year? Like why is this important? What goes into it?
This is a great question. I think it's not my idea, but I think it's the future of saving this system and other systems across the world. Is if you're going to restore a system, there's really 2 big things you influence. It's the structure and the seed and the species. And the way, so there's a lot of different ways to do it. It takes a long time to do it right, but basically the idea is we only have so many pockets of this habitat, for example, right? And not all pockets have a lot of species in them. So the idea is, how do we take from those delicate systems and then mass produce that seed to expand in areas that are upland, in the face of climate change? And it takes a lot of science. There's something called seed transfer zones. Like, you don't want to take a very delicate pollinated plant on Long Island and plant that seed here, because it might have maladaptation issues, a big word, I know, but there might run into inbreeding and things like that, and that can actually hurt that population. So there's a lot of science involved, but the Nature Conservancy is working with the Sandplain Grassland Network to, especially folks in Long Island who have been looking at this for a long time. And the idea, to answer your question, is, for example, you take seed from different grasslands here on Martha's Vineyard. Grass, for example, little blue stem. Everybody wants little blue stem, it's a hot commodity. You send a little bit of that to somewhere like a farm and they grow it. And then from there, people call that farm up after it's mass produced and they just buy it. The difference between that and just buying it from completely off island is you're getting that local ecotype. So you're keeping the genetics from on island back on island. And that's the important thing.
Oh, that's great. So it is a little bit like, yeah, you're growing to mass produce seeds. The purpose is to collect those seeds. It's interesting thinking. I know with animals, we're really careful about not bringing diseases from one place to another, or different, bacterias or something. I had never thought about that being the case as well. Thinking about the genetics of plants. Really interesting. Jeff Tandle, referring to the burn, makes a comment. He says, I'm a big fan of controlled burning. However, are not all the climate change people complaining about the release of smoke and carbon? In parentheses, keep in mind, wildfires are natural and have been around since time immemorial. And so I thought that too, as we saw the picture of the billowing smoke. It's like, yeah, this is a release of carbon, but in the long term, a healthy ecosystem is storing carbon in the soils. And
just to talk very quickly on that point about trade-offs, some of you might know planetary boundaries. There's pollution, there's ocean acidification, there's climate change, there's biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss is like well past its threshold. I think it's even worse than climate change. And the reason is because the background rate, it takes a lot longer for a species to be made than it is to be lost or losing species every day. And so if you kind of bring that down to the context of the sites that we work on here, where I've seen species that are endemic to this region be extirpated from Long Island, like silvery aster was recently extirpated. It's gone. Yeah. It exists here on Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, but very, very sparsely. So we're actually seeing biodiversity loss here, so we got to protect it.
Yeah. Jeff Tandle notes, agreed, we have a similar situation in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. Fires actually necessary for pitch pine to reproduce. Really fascinating ecosystem. And Tom Jones says, at the Commonwealth level, we've had our proponents that have worked with us on the inside. Are there potential folks on the island that can help us carry the burden? Are there community programs where we might be able to more deeply associate burning with world-class environmental action? And to that end, we've had widespread support from the other conservation organization on the island, as well as the state. So there's lots of others who are carrying this message. Has that been effective, in terms of the general population?
Well, I will mirror what you're saying. We can't do what we do without partners. It's just pretty much only me here, and we do so much with partners. An example of that is our recent burns. Typically in the past, we had a contractor, Joel Carlson, who did a tremendous job for over the years. He had a private company and he would burn for us. It was nice and easy, but he has since left to go somewhere else. So for the past couple of years, we relied on the state to actually provide these burns. So to that end, we actually rely on the state rather than the other way around. But to answer your question, we're looking at some real challenges here, and we need to band together as partners to look at ways where we can influence policy to make it easier to burn on private land, for example. And then also just like train up people who are more qualified to be bossing these burns. It's getting increasingly harder to burn, especially on a wealthy island like this, with all the insurance issues and stuff. So we gotta find solutions to that.
Yeah, and that's obviously an issue, for other coastal communities that may have this, or Nantucket, as you said. one of our guests, Mr. Ms. or Mrs. Ferreira asks, to what extent have you planted native cedars? Have we planted any native cedars?
That's a good question. Typically on the grasslands that we've been managing, we've actually been trying to keep cedars to a minimum. However, there are some areas like at Katama Airfield that we do keep some cedars. We call it interstitial habitat. And so anytime we do any management, we actually develop a strong management plan, and then it gets vetted by the state ecologist, who right now is Chris Bulow, and he does a wonderful job. And he really likes leaving some of these cedars around for these rare moths. We're getting ready to do a project next year. We just learned about it. It's going to be sort of this oak cedar savanna. And it's meant to be part of like this sort of mosaic habitat and help these rare moths. So yes.
Oh, that's very cool. And I love you talking about having a savanna. I always think of Africa with savanna. I didn't know we had something called the savanna here, you know, that's in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Very cool. We have a question that I actually was curious about as well. After our burn, did we see any plants pop up that we didn't expect to see? Any surprises?
We've been managing Katama Airfield for the past 35 years, so typically no surprises over there. However, in some of our more recent, the big surprise there for me was an increase of a rare plant by a pretty good proportion. It was just kind of ballooning in population, and that was a result because we hadn't been burning there in the fall up until this year. We tried this fall burn now that it's entering a restoration phase. It was just incredible to see what happened.
So, which
yeah.
is to say, for some plant, the fall burn made the difference, and it's for other plants, it's the spring burn.
That's exactly right, and that's one reason why we don't burn the whole area at once. We kind of do it in units, and we also change up the type of management that we do.
Really, really cool. So we've got a question from Marianne Jorgensen, who asks, does TNC have plans to conserve more land on Martha's Vineyard? And you want to go for it? I can as well.
Yeah, I think it's part of I recently worked with a team of leadership to develop the vision for the next 10 years, and we do have that in there. Like I said in the end of this presentation, I think the way forward is looking for opportunities to move inland here when those opportunities present themselves, so that we can start, restoring land more inland in the face of climate change.
Yeah. On Martha's Vineyard, there's a robust community of conservation organizations that do such a great job. And there are a lot of them are really focused on public access, getting people outside. There's so much wonderful, there's so many wonderful acres of natural areas. And so, we at the Nature Conservancy are really thinking about how do we add value in this rich ecosystem of organizations, and we keep our eye open for the right opportunities. And we're thinking about ecological value. We're thinking about our existing holdings, and do we add to them so that we can make better management decisions because we've got more to work with. And so the answer, I think, is we have nothing specific in mind right now, but we're always open to conversation if it's the right place and the right time. And we've got the donors who we think would be interested in helping us make it happen.
That's well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, and one of the ways we do this is a really good example. I know this person's probably on the call, but one of the sites that we mentioned, is a conservation buyer. And so this is a person this is going to be a golf course, and they came in and bought the land and then put it in conservation and put a stewardship endowment on their land forever. So it's always protected, and we can always do that good management on their land. So there's definitely different ways to do it, rather than us just outright going out and buying it.
We have a really good question from Norm Strahl, who says, we saw that last picture with the erosion, which was really, it hit home for me at least. And Norm says, is the erosion rate you mentioned inevitable, or do the restored grasslands slow the rate of erosion?
The point of that, I think it's inevitable. And the point of that image is just to show the tangible, like how omnipresent climate change is. there. And I wish I included the image to show you the difference over the years of how it's not going to be around forever. And the point of that image is just to show you that that whole all the genetics of all those species on that island are going to be lost if we don't save some of that seed, bring it elsewhere, and restore lands inland. And that's really like the best example I can give people to visualize like what we're facing on the edge of the coast of the South Shore of Martha's Vineyard and elsewhere. And again, remember, Martha's Vineyard is the stronghold along with Nantucket, but Nantucket's not burning over there. So Martha's Vineyard is a real stronghold to save this ecosystem.
And I think by way of explanation, there's always been erosion. You can think about that natural, impact of the waves on shore. What's different now because of climate change is with sea level rise and with our extreme storms, we have, bigger king tides. We've got, a great, the ocean is wilder, the storms are wilder. And so it's just accelerating the erosion by, you described it, by a lot. So, when you think about the world and how the coasts have changed over time, they're going to continue to change over time, no matter what. That's just, the wave action, right? To the extent that we can do things to slow down the destruction, it really makes sense. Because in light of climate change, it is going to happen more and faster. So, what's inland today is going to be coastal, not quite tomorrow, but soon. And I don't think that it is what it is. So we have to do what we can. Right. That's how I feel about it. I know there was some chat about, oh, this is so depressing, and it doesn't have to be. There are things we know we can do to make a difference. And the work you do, Mike, is so important in helping us look at solutions. And there's other partners on the island too, who are really thinking about how do we protect our shorelines and using nature to help make sure that we can be as resilient as possible and put off that erosion as long as possible. So yeah, it must feel good to be doing work that is really worth doing. Like every day you're like, don't we all want to do, make the world a better place and get paid for it with a salary, right? And you actually get to make the world where you're living a better place. So
sometimes I have to pinch myself. This is literally, I couldn't have written a better job description. It's a dream job, and I feel really blessed to work here. Yeah.
Well, I know we're going to get questions from folks about how can I help? So, I know you've got volunteer opportunities from time to time, such as like helping planting. Will there be any opportunities this summer for people who are on the island to join in and help?
Yes, there's always opportunities to volunteer. Typically, our busy seasons to volunteer are spring and fall. So we've got a really cool event coming up here. I don't know the exact date yet, and it would be planting those 1,000 Liatris New England Blazing Star on one of our restoration sites. So we just got approval from the state, and now I'm just waiting on another thing to develop an event. If anybody's interested here, please do shoot me an email or shoot Liz an email, and she'll put you in contact with me, and we could always use the help. It's going to be a one-day event. It's going to be in the next couple of weeks. We'd love to hear from you.
That's really great. We've just a couple more questions I'm going to try to get to before we're done. One, Bill Fleming mentions big ag and land grant universities have tended to promote fescue for cattle grazing as kind of grass. And in fact, I took a home and garden horticulture class and they promoted fescue, not for cattle grazing, but as a grass that was supposed to be really hardy, I guess. He goes on to say most of Nebraska's grazing land is reportedly high in this endophyte fescue, which this is a fungi that's included in this non-native grass. Is there anything being done to promote native grasses to replace fescue?
Yeah, there's now when we look at all the different species lists from one of the sites as part of my research, fescue, some fescue species are a common signature in all the grasslands, because a lot of these grasslands are cultural landscapes left over from the big grazing boom. There's 15,000 sheep here on the island at one point in the 1800s.
Wow, I forgot about that. I didn't know that.
They sort of kept the island open, and that's how things moved around, and species moved around a lot too. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of the work we do is really replacing the non-native grasses with native grasses. Poverty oak grass is one native cool season grass that we use, little blue stem, and things like that.
Nice. We did get a question about from Robert Egerton about the challenge of housing on Martha's Vineyard, and he wondered if TNC has any land that could be used in partnership with housing organizations, particularly if the housing bank gets approved by the state legislature to build additional housing. And I would say at this point, we really don't. Our land we hold in conservation for its ecological benefits, and Hoff Farm is really unique as a historic building that we've been able to repurpose for housing interns. And so I don't think TNC is part of the housing shortage solution, I'm sorry to say, on the island. Well, listen, we're coming up to the end, and just Mike, thank you so much. You're really a gem. I'm sure everyone who's listened can agree. The work you do is so interesting and important. I want to thank everybody who's on for joining us today. We really appreciate your support of the Nature Conservancy. It is your support that makes all of this work possible. And for folks who are interested, we will be sending everyone a follow-up email in the coming days, or it might be a week or so. And it'll have links to the resources we talked about today, including a recording of this webinar, which you are welcome to share with your friends and family members, anyone you think would be interested in hearing what Mike had to tell us. You can also follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram. It's a good way to keep up with our work and to get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect. And on that note, please do join us for our next webinar, which is a week from Thursday, or actually Thursday, June 9th at noon, a week from Thursday. We're going to be chatting with Brad Krebs, the director of the Clinch Valley program for the Nature Conservancy. He's going to share the innovative collaboration underway between the Nature Conservancy and solar companies to pursue the development of utility-scale solar projects on former mined lands within the 250,000-acre Cumberland Forest project of Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. This is super important because as they're turning away from coal, there has to be some other alternative that's going to bring economic benefit to the region. TNC's effort to expand solar and other renewable energy is just one strategy to address the challenge of climate change. By collaborating with Sun Tribe Solar and Dominion Energy on 7 utility-scale solar projects on mined lands, TNC is contributing to the growth of a clean energy economy while protecting forests and creating benefits for local communities. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be really interesting. So please sign up today at nature.org/MA webinars. And I just want to thank you one more time for joining us, and a big thank you to Mike.
Thanks, guys.